Hello, my name is Jim Mayer. I'm a training specialist with the Illinois Center for Transition and Work, and I'm going to be speaking with you today about job analysis and job carving. Job analysis and job carving are two very useful strategies you can utilize to effectively assist individuals with high support needs in finding successful employment. A little about my background. I'm a certified rehab counselor with areas of specialization in supported employment and special education. My work experience includes 15 years in adult services, where I coordinated a supported employment program, and 21 years in the schools, where I was a regional coordinator of a career planning and work experience program for transition-aged students. Our objectives for today are twofold. Job analysis and job carving are strategies that are more commonly discussed in the world of adult services. I hope you will find, as I have, that they can be extremely useful in our efforts to help students with disabilities move towards and into successful employment. I hope this information will bolster you in your work and give you some valuable techniques to assist you and your students in gaining access to work experiences and employment. In the first half of the presentation, I will cover job analysis. In the second half, we will discuss strategies for job carving and negotiation with the potential employer. Job analysis and job carving are strategies common to supported employment, which is now commonly referred to as customized employment. OSERS, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, in its definition of customized employment, highlights a number of strategies that I will be covering in this presentation. Namely, I will be focusing on how job analysis and job carving techniques can be utilized to A, produce a customized job description based on employer needs and the interests and skills of our targeted student. B, include provisions for the optimal arrangement of duties, scheduling, workstation, and supervision. And C, use job analysis information to work with the employer on details of job placement and support. Now we'll launch into part one of the presentation, job analysis. Based on comprehensive transition assessment information you've gathered with and for your student, the next step is to identify those employers who you think may be a good fit for your student. Then take a deep dive into getting to know these employers. Job analysis is a very focused way of learning about the needs, assets, and particularities of potential employers, while developing relationships and looking for win-win possibilities. It involves looking critically at a business's way of doing things, with an eye for how they might be done better with the help of your student and your program. Good job analysis involves simultaneously gathering information that will help all parties involved in making good decisions as to whether an employment or work experience situation could make sense for the business, the student, and the program. Consider sites where you may find a good fit for an individual student or a range of potential work-based learning experience opportunities for multiple students. And consider sites where good training experiences could lead to employment. Finally, realize not every analysis will result in a good fit necessarily. All right, now we're going to talk about this overall process. Bear in mind these multiple steps. First, you want to gather student profile and assessment information, including career interest surveys, observations at work experience sites, vocational skill assessments, and input from parents, guardians, and other support people. Secondly, we want to gather information about potential employers, including on-site job analysis based on observations, informational interviews, work tryouts, etc. Thirdly, we want to look for the best matches. Using both the business and student analysis data, we want to create sort of a comparison chart with pros and cons of various sites. And then finally, and fourthly, we want to consider possible plans for job modifications, which may include job carving, and which should include a proposed set of training services. All right, now we have this graphic showing our end result of the process, which is ideally an excellent match between the student worker and the job, thus between employer and employee. All right, so We're going to look at job analysis from the vantage point of 5 important factors. So these 5 factors are really important for both student assessment and job site analysis. I'm going to lead you through a job analysis process by detailing considerations within these 5 factors. This process was created in 2007 by my former colleagues Sue Ann Morrow and Tom Sechrist as part of the training materials we developed for employment specialists through the University of Illinois Region 5 Rehabilitation Continuing Education Program. There are other published forms and systems for job analysis, but not all of them include these 5 important factors. So whether you choose to use the Morrow-Sechrist format or another, please keep these 5 factors in mind. For example, factor number 5, culture of the workplace, can be a very key consideration. All right, now we're going to launch into that first factor of preferences. We're going to look at work types, appealing jobs, and career development opportunities. So firstly, in terms of work types, we're going to be looking not only at the variety of formal positions that exist at that site, but also at the variety of tasks that need to be completed at the business, sort of within various job descriptions. We're going to be looking at appealing jobs, really, tasks that might be appealing to our student or students, tasks either within jobs or possibilities for alternative job descriptions. And then finally, under career development, we want to be looking to see, what career development opportunities are available there and which will be accessible to our student. So the overall approach here is to look creatively at what is currently available and what might be possible with job modification, systematic training, adaptive equipment, job carving, etc. All right, our second factor is logistics. Here we want to look at schedule and travel. So under schedule, some key questions to get answers to are, find out if shifts are set or if they're rotating. For example, do staff work rotating weekends? Find out when part-time versus full-time shifts are available, and is there any flexibility in that? Look at busy versus less busy shifts, and look at things like, might a person train during those less busy times? Under travel, some considerations there would be, is public transit available and reliable? How far is the walk to the bus stops that would be involved in that? Do many of the employees, the current employees at this site, use the city buses? Is ride sharing a common thing, or carpooling? So your approach here is to think creatively based on what you know about your student, their family situation, their friend network. Are those possible ride opportunities that exist for them? Could an extra part-time shift during the busiest time of the day be useful? And might those busiest times when your student might be most needed, do those happen to coincide with public transportation availability? For instance, in other words, are there possibility of creating some shifts that would be possible for your student to get there and to be most helpful? All right, our next consideration is financial concerns. So we're going to look at 4 different aspects of that. First of all, under incentives, many of us need to realize that many of us work for perks other than salary. And then also, there may be some employer incentives that could be a possibility. For instance, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, WOTC. I have found that to be of most interest to some of the larger companies who have the legal and bookkeeping resources to access that particular governmental incentive. Under salary, we want to find out when evaluations occur, what is expected to get a raise. Is it automatic or merit-based? And then within that, how is merit measured? Under benefits, it's important to, gain information for our individual student and for their family. We also want to be aware of possible public benefits that student may qualify for, that might be affected by working. And we want to be aware of, various opportunities within that. For instance, the student might be able to seek work incentive program assistance through the Division of Rehab Services. They have an office for that. And then Social Security for their various disability programs offer work incentives as well. There's information readily available on those opportunities. And then finally, under promotion opportunities, we want to look at kind of the traditional and what you might consider non-traditional promotion opportunities. So for instance, just an increase in work hours and duties over time might be a potential promotion that our student worker may be able to succeed in. All right, our next factor we're going to look at is performance. We're going to look at a number of points within that. First off, strength. In addition to looking at the minimum requirements, be thinking about potential aids, for example, carts or racks, and whether the heaviest work can be spread out over the shift. For example, it might be possible for a worker to alternate between heavy duties, lighter duties, heavy duties, etc. And under endurance, in addition to observing the typical work's pace there, we want to note whether breaks must follow a strict regimen or if there appears to be some flexibility in that. For example, might they allow shorter, more frequent breaks? Under quality, we want to note whether coworkers typically help check one another's work. If not, does this seem like a reasonable thing to suggest? Are there quality checklists that exist? Or perhaps is there a tool or device that can check quality that is present or that we might be able to bring to the situation for our student? All right, continuing on with performance, a few other factors to look at. First being speed, and some of the concerns there might be, can rate be enhanced with adaptive equipment? And I can give a quick example of that. I worked with a group of young women in adult services who were really interested in kind of craft-oriented work, wanted indoor work, seated work was their preference. And there was a local company that packaged some craft-type items, and I helped these individuals obtain a piece of equipment that they actually were able to co-own after getting a grant from the Division of Rehab Services. And this piece of equipment helped them increase their speed and their accuracy and basically leveled the playing field for these individuals. So under learning style, some things to look at. Are allowances currently being made to accommodate differences in employees during the training phase in particular? Is coworker coaching allowed or perhaps encouraged? Under academics, some things to look at. Is it okay to use aids like counting devices, pictorial or verbal instructions, little kind of alarm systems to keep a person on track and remind them of various things in their shift? Those would all be possible adaptations that could be considered to help with if there's a little gap there with some of the academic skills. And then finally, under mobility, do some jobs require less mobility than others? Can individuals use carts or scooters to get around? Is it necessary to use stairs or steps in the workplace? And if so, are there elevators or other possible workarounds, ramps, elevators, etc.? Okay, moving on to the final considerations under performance. So medication considerations. The big question I have found there to look at is it feasible for a person to take their breaks to coincide with when they might need to take an important medication? As far as routines, do there appear to be allowances made around skill and preference? For example, could a worker with less endurance maybe do less walking and do some of the more of the seated tasks at that department? And could a more kinetic, let's say, coworker do more of that footwork if that's their preference? As far as environment, some questions to look at as far as environmental demands would be, are workers allowed to use things like noise-canceling headphones, for instance, or other types of equipment that might help with that, with environmental concerns, like, can a person wear gloves if that's beneficial to them? Can they use a fan for staying cool? Can they use a stool if there's, a lot of standing involved? Some of those kinds of things in the work environment. All right, and then finally, now we're going to move on to our fifth and final factor of culture of the workplace. So the considerations here start out with supervision and support. So some key questions to ask here. Is there a lot of turnover among the supervisors and or coworkers? Are coworkers encouraged to help one another? Do supervisors use a kind tone in giving feedback? Under reinforcement, in addition to the pay schedule, are there any other fun or interesting perks? Like, for instance, does the workplace have a donut day if they've had a good week, for instance, or are there some seasonal or special gifts that they give away to employees? Do the employees get an early out at the end of a really successful, productive work week? Those are just some of those typical things you might look at under reinforcement. Under orientation and training, is it acceptable for a job coach to assist in, let's say, some of those early trainings, those computer modules, and some of those kinds of things? Many employers are open to that kind of assistance. Are there pre-employment requirements like drug testing, background checks, first aid training, et cetera? And again, you're kind of be looking out for, is that something that your student might need assistance with? And is there periodic in-service training, which could be helpful, but also a concern as far as, maybe needing to see, again, if a job coach could help a student with those periodic trainings. So under communication, we'd want to look at things like, are coworkers generally supportive of one another at this site? Is there a lot of joking and teasing that happens at work? And if so, is it easy or hard to participate in that? Do they have potlucks or other special events periodically there, either at work or related to the work group? And again, looking, could our student access those activities and enjoy them? Under appearance, some things to look at would be, are there hair, jewelry, or clothing restrictions around safety or decorum that might or might not be an issue for our individual? And then finally, behavior. What are the written and unwritten rules of what is acceptable at this site? Are there enough good role models for a student who may struggle in understanding rules and limits? All right, now we're going to proceed into part 2, negotiation and job carving. After you have completed a job analysis, it may be time to negotiate with the business by discussing a proposal for employment or for a work-based learning experience, depending on the goal for your particular student. So your proposal should consider the following. First, ideas for possible job modifications or adaptations. Secondly, matching your student's strengths and interests with employer needs. You want to kind of map out what this could look like. So thirdly, you want to be proactively ready to address and problem solve any employer concerns. Fourthly, you want to develop a plan that creates a win-win for your student, the employer, and your program. Really a win-win-win, right? And finally, you want to be careful not to promise anything you can't deliver. It's much better to promise only what you know you have the resources to provide. Then if you find you can go beyond this, wonderful. All right, so next we're going to look at some possible concerns an employer might express about this plan that you're proposing. And we'll talk about some potential responses you might offer to them. So first, they may want to know, could our efficiency be affected by bringing in this student worker? So what you want to do is demonstrate how your student is likely to respond to the training plans you've developed based on this wonderful job analysis information that you have. Talk about the likely payoff that employer may receive in terms of potential worker longevity after what might be a somewhat longer learning curve initially. So another concern they might express would be, will the coworkers accept your student workers? So some possible solutions here. You may be able to offer some disability awareness training at that job site. You might even offer those workers who attend it some kind of a certificate of completion to kind of build them up, build those coworkers up as potential support people for the long-term success of your student. And really, that disability awareness may help that employer in other ways in terms of being aware of customers and others who they interface with in their community. So a third question might be ADA compliance. The employer want to know, can I afford to make reasonable accommodations your student may need? So your response might include providing ideas for some accommodations that may be either no cost or low cost. It may even involve if there's expense involved, it might be possible that you could do, as I mentioned earlier, that I've done, which is to look at your student obtaining some kind of grant or assistance with obtaining some equipment they need so that it's not an imposition on that employer. Another concern an employer might express is, what if this doesn't work out? Can I terminate the student worker? So, part of your response to this would be, hopefully, if you've done a good job in job matching, job analysis, and have a really sound training plan, then this will hopefully not even become an issue. But it may also be helpful to remind that employer that this is going to be an employment relationship where the student's going to need to follow company policies for employment, and with that, it might help for you to sort of again remind them that you and your school program are there to help problem solve and to again hopefully help remedy any bumps in the road that may cause concern for that employer. And then finally, the employer may be worried about what if this student needs long-term support after they've aged out of the school program or graduated. So it may help here to let the business know that if needed, if that student does end up needing some longer term support, that might be something you can assist with, that there are some resources out there through adult services that you might be able to talk with the Division of Rehab Services, for instance, see if they could help fund some follow-up job coaching or ongoing services that student may need. All right. Now to move on into job carving, let's start out with just some definitions and to really talk about when you might use job carving. So first off, just to look at this definition. So job carving defined is a restructure or redesign of an existing job or jobs to better fit the capabilities of the person performing it. The use of it is when you find a potential match that appears ideal except for a few performance-related aspects. Some things that we might be able to look at some workarounds with. Thirdly, we'd want to be focusing here on some subtasks within current job descriptions that your student could enjoy and perform well. And we want to really key in on with this some tasks that could save the business money or increase their efficiency. So it's really taking that deeper dive into job analysis to do a more detailed study of those performance aspects. And, looking at job redesign is, it's a way for you to find an effective job. It's one that your student can do, wants to do, and one that has value to the organization. So some tips for proposing job carving. You want to look at all the tasks that need to be completed at that business. And here's the key one. This second point is to listen very carefully to any concerns the employer is expressing about things that, let's say, aren't getting done efficiently, that their workers are having trouble getting to, things that you might be able to help with, you and your student. Thirdly, you want to ask questions to help pinpoint some of those areas of current inefficiencies or tasks. And then finally, you want to identify some potential tasks for job carving. So, my advice is you enter this study with the humble belief that there's always a better method for doing things. So ask if you can observe and shadow current workers, perhaps even trying some of those tasks hands-on. Of course, first gaining company approval and instructions to do that. And also, while observing and learning, remember to strive to listen more than speak. Really showing your role at this stage is to learn from them about their business. And to be successful, I recommend you aim for something like an 80-20 ratio of listening to speaking. Okay, now the basic procedures for job carving. We're going to select these 7 steps that you see on the screen in detail. So the first is to select the work to be studied. Second, to record facts about their present methods of doing these tasks. Thirdly, to analyze the tasks and then the sequences really within those tasks very critically. Fourthly, we want to help the business look at the most effective. We want to develop what we consider the most effective methods to getting those tasks done, and then we want to look at a way to kind of sell this new method to the employer, these new methods. And after once that's been accomplished, then the next step is to help install these new methods and a training program for your student or students, and then finally to maintain and fine-tune this plan, this new way of doing things via plenty of follow-up and ongoing observation. So again, we'll talk about these 7 in detail now in the next 7 slides. And it's helpful to remember an old engineering principle. Record the new procedure and compare it with the old one. If it is judged to be superior, use it. All right, so we're going to look at those first 2 steps now of selecting the tasks and recording information about them. So, selecting, we want to select those subtasks that appear to be a good match with what the employer needs and what our students are interested in and have the skills to do. So we want to rely heavily on our initial job analysis information on for the employer needs part. And we also want to rely on our student assessment information about their skills and interests to guide this initial step of selecting those work tasks for study. And then secondly, now for the step of recording, that we're looking at sequence and process within key tasks and whether things are modifiable. We want to look at rate and speed requirements and possible workarounds. We want to look at things like the workstation layout, the positioning of tools or equipment, and then within that, thinking about potential aids, and then finally materials and environment, looking at any safety or sensory concerns, any possible adaptations there. So we want to use, in order to accomplish this big task of recording all of this, is we want to use things like existing job descriptions. Some places may even have what they call a workflow description. We want to observe and take notes, even take photos if that's allowed there. We want to note whether workers use any jigs or fixtures to aid in completing tasks. And we want to note the paths of workers and also of materials, the kind of the flow of people and materials through that workplace. Are there any ergonomic issues in terms of those workstations or tasks? Looking at the body position that workers typically use there, and are there any concerns there for that you have for your students, and whether that's modifiable? Take note of any potential issues with things like lighting, heat, cold, noise, etc. And within that, are there any potential hazards for the student worker, and do workers use protective equipment or devices? All right, so now we want to look at the next step, which is to analyze all this information we've recorded. And to analyze, we want to use a series of why questions. What is done and why? Who does it and why? Where is it done and why? When is it done and why? And how is it done and why? And these why questions can lead to can it questions like, can it be eliminated? Can it be combined? Can it be simplified? Can it be rearranged or improved? So next, we're going to develop a new method. And the strategy we're going to use is to eliminate all unnecessary work, combine elements as feasible, things that make sense to go together, simplify elements as feasible. Again, if there are some steps that are kind of superfluous or not needed, we'll eliminate those. We want to change or rearrange the method, sequence, and assignment of operations to meet the employer's needs and create a doable, satisfying student job. So within that, the plan might include some minor equipment or environment modifications. So this stage of planning might involve writing some new job descriptions and helping to develop some success criteria within that. How does the employer measure that your student worker is doing it correctly? Ideally, this will lead to some enhanced job descriptions for coworkers as well. If, for instance, if some tasks get pulled from current workers, to be more efficient and given to your student worker, that may involve some tweaking in those job descriptions for coworkers as well, and hopefully some increased efficiency for everybody at that workplace. So once we've developed the plan, we're going to try to sell it to that employer. And really what we're selling is both a new method for doing these particular tasks, and also we're selling them on the services that come with it, the services that your program can offer. So first, we're going to talk about this using a technique called FAB, features, advantages, and benefits. It's a sales approach commonly used in the business world. We're going to discuss what I like to call the FAB Plus approach, which adds costs and proof to the list. So when we're talking features, we're really talking about the physical characteristics of your plan and your services. In terms of advantages, there we're discussing what the related features do and how they perform. Each feature generally will have more than one advantage to it. Next, when we're talking benefits, that would be a summary of what the advantages mean to the business in positive terms. So very specific benefits they're going to gain from this plan. And then the costs, that really is, it's an honest assessment of what's going to be asked of the employer. It's a summary of some potential disadvantages for them. For example, we've already alluded to that there may be a somewhat extended training period that would be needed for your student to worker to learn the job. There may be a little staff time involved in that in terms of other staff members who may need to observe or lend some help to the training period. There may be a possible rework, as we implied, to some of the job descriptions. So that would involve a little work for the employer. If you might be able to help craft that student job description, but they may prefer to recraft. They probably will prefer to recraft their own job descriptions for the other workers, and in any ways those would change. And then finally, proof. Really, it's examples you can give them about your program and its track record. You might, for instance, have some actual kind of testimonials that you can offer to them, or people you could connect them with from, maybe there's a related type of business you've worked with before in the area who would be willing to talk with them or give some kind of a thumbs up to your program and your set of services. All right, so next we're going to talk about installing the program. So some keys to that. You want to be ready and willing to offer help to introduce the idea to coworkers. So, and hopefully you've done some of this along the way as far as, building relationships as you've been there to observe and to kind of create the plan. And we've already implied that you want to kind of be looking to recruit some possible help from those coworkers who seem open to that and most kind of logical to approach for that. And so there you want to be looking at how you can help those coworkers adapt to this change. You want to install an excellent training plan. It's got to be a great plan that can help your student get up to speed, hopefully, fairly quickly. And then you want to time it carefully and have some contingency plans or backup plans, for those kind of inevitable bumps in the road you might see. So, homework and groundwork really pay off at this stage. If you have a good plan and have made good allies along the way, then you've set the stage for installing the plan well. Also, timing, as we've just discussed, is very important. You need to realize change is often very difficult for people and organizations. So be sure not to rush things along in your zeal to help your student get started. Be aware also of the weekly, monthly, or seasonal demands of the business, and strive to time the start date accordingly so that your student is positioned really well to succeed. All right, next we come to maintaining this new method. So some steps you might consider here are, first off, plenty of follow-up. You want to be ready to tweak the training or implementation plan quickly if needed. You want to verify that your student worker is thriving. You kind of be able to kind of check their weather report on how they're doing, and then ensure that you want to obviously help ensure that the employer's criteria are being met by this new method you have proposed. So you want to be sure to be very, very present and responsive, particularly in the earliest stages of the plan. So especially during that kind of proverbial probationary period of the first 3 months. You want to frequently check in with the student, the job coach, the managers, coworkers, respond to problems proactively, be prepared for those inevitable bumps in the road. Like when that honeymoon stage is over. So, when some of the newness wears off, and when tasks or coworkers may change, it could be another possible bump in the road, or when the job coaching fade out plan begins, when that job coach starts to be less present there at the site, could be another time to be on the lookout for any possible problems. All right, so now in summary, we'll kind of wrap things up here in kind of revisiting some of what we've talked about. So there are these 5 important factors to consider, which again, they're considerations both for student assessment and for job site analysis. We discussed that job process or that job analysis process in detail, and we looked at important considerations within all 5 of these factors. So as you develop your own system for job analysis, please keep these 5 factors in mind, remembering that 5th factor, culture of the workplace, can be a sometimes overlooked, yet a very key consideration. All right, now we also want to review the basic procedures we looked at for job carving. These 7 factors of that kind of deeper dive beyond our initial job analysis to look at a potential job carving situation that we see might be available at a given site based on just some of those our students' skills and interests, and also on performance aspects that we think might be that we might develop some go-arounds for, some workarounds for. All right, and then finally, I want to revisit this overall process that we had talked about. So let's recall this slide where we looked at, first gathering student profile information, including observations at the work site or at work experience sites rather, and inputs from multiple people. We talked about gathering information about potential employers, including on-site job analysis. We talked about looking for the best matches. So using both our business information and the student information that we gathered. And then finally, we want to consider possible plans for job modifications, which might include job carving, and which should include also a proposed set of well-developed training plans. All right, so thanks very much for your interest in this topic. My closing slide here is a set of different resources that were important to this presentation. I also hope these resources will assist you in your efforts to provide excellent career and vocational services to the young people you have the honor of working with. Thank you for your interest in this topic, for the important work that you do, and please consider allowing our center, the Illinois Center for Transition and Work, to help you further and to bolster you in your work with and for students with disabilities in whatever ways we can. Thank you again.